to a slightly less professional live stream. Number 42. Also, just knocked something over on the floor there. Not very professional at all. The light will probably fade as well behind me as it goes on. I have turned the lights on in the room that I'm in, but this is just going to have to be the way that it is. I do apologise. So tonight we're going to be talking about really peculiar saloon and estate versions of normal hatchback cars. I'm just going to be bringing up the little tab here so we can keep an eye on whatever questions and things that we have coming through the chat system. As always, I seem to have started a little bit earlier than usual. I don't know why I like to be early for things. It just makes me feel better. So we'll put that on mute there. Let me start that, and we'll bring the pop-up chat window there. So the one that's come to mind and the inspiration behind everything that we've been doing is the Suzuki SX4 Saloon. The Suzuki SX4 Saloon was only sold in this country between 2009 and 2011. There was only one engine and gearbox option available, which was 1.6 manual. Now, the facelift occurred on the SX4 range, which was also available as a 5-door hatch, in 2010. So the saloon in this country straddled the facelift. The early ones, which are with a GLX specification, but only one specification at a time, were 107 horsepower, and then the later ones, the SZ4 specification, so it's the SX4, SZ4, which is stupid, they were 118 horsepower, and they sold those until 2011. Very, very small kind of seller over here. In some parts of the world, as people have already said from the post I put on YouTube community page yesterday, they were much bigger sellers elsewhere in the world. But that's one particular sort of rare saloon version of a normal hatchback would be the Suzuki SX4, sold for just over 2 years. Another one would be another Suzuki, the Suzuki Swift Saloon. It was, I think, only available with 1.6 engine and 4-wheel drive. It would have been the generation sold from about 1988. I don't think there are any of those left anymore either. A very, very rare car indeed. I don't know why anybody would sort of want that, actually, but they existed. Also, the Renault Clio Mark III Estate. I don't really know why they marketed that. At the time, there were things like the Volkswagen Polo Estate that was available on the Mark III Polo, I think, was available estate, and the Seat Cordoba Vario, which was a version of that. In fact, the Cordoba is a very strange car anyway, because it was based on the Ibiza, but it was a 4-door saloon or 2-door coupe, or the Vario was the estate. Very, very strange. I don't remember the last time I saw. I think the Cordoba SX was the 2-door coupe version. I don't know the last time I saw a Cordoba Vario or a Cordoba SX. And then I think the Cordoba actually continued with the saloon onto the next generation of the Ibiza, which was the same as the Mark IV Polo, the 9N. But I haven't seen one of those for a really long time. The Ford Focus Mark II was also available as a saloon. Definitely pre-facelift. Post-facelift were only available for a few months, I think. So if you see a post-facelift Ford Focus Mark II saloon in this country, you're doing really quite well. So there's loads of these kind of things. The Seat Malaga, that was an interesting car. It was marketed over here. It was basically a saloon version of what was called the Seat Ronda, which was a facelifted Fiat Strada sold in Spain. So we've had all kinds of weird saloon and estate versions of normal hatchback cars for a really, really long time. Paulie Gattari says good evening. Having a restful Easter break. Yes, unfortunately we've had 2 people in my family hospitalised over the last 24 hours, which hasn't been something too wonderful, but that's the way it goes sometimes, unfortunately. That's not my name. Says good evening. Good evening to you, sir. Simone Puts on Classics says hello. Hello, Simone. I'm just trying to think of another type. Oh yeah, the classic one is the Fiat Tipo Saloon, which was sold in this country for less than a year. It was sold from 2019 to 2020, and of course I've driven one of those on the channel. I'm one of the few people, I think, ever in this country to give a Fiat Tipo Saloon a full review. Yeah, I don't think anybody else ever has. I think I'm the only one. There's a little walk around that dealers have done, and I don't mind walk around of one. We did that in February 2020, but I don't think anyone else has actually driven one in this country on YouTube. I don't think anybody else has. I think I'm the only one, as far as I understand it. Matt W says hello, sir. Paulie Galtieri says, what about Volkswagen Vento? Volkswagen Vento was the saloon version of the Mark III Golf, and that later became the Bora. The Ventos, I don't think they were that uncommon. They weren't really obscure like an SX4 saloon or something like that. They were a bit more common. And then, of course, it was the Bora and later the Jetta. The Jetta Mark I came out quite late on in the production life of the Mark I Golf. It came out in 1980 with the facelift of the Mark I Golf. And my parents used to own one. It was a CL. It's the first car that what the parents bought after my twin sister and I were born. I think they bought it in March 1983. They had it for a long time. I had it about 7 years. And every time I see a Mark I Jetta, it's not very often. The most common time you'd see a Mark I Jetta would be something like Retro Rise Weekender, to be honest. It's sort of time you'd see a Mark I Jetta. They sometimes see them there, but they're so uncommon. Yeah, just the way that it goes. That's what my name says. Did Fiat do a saloon version of the SX4? No, they didn't. The SX4 was available with Fiat badges called the Sedici, and Fiat used some of their own engines. We can't talk about in those as well. But yeah, the Sedici didn't sell nearly as well as the SX4 at all. Really didn't sell very well. The facelifted SX Sedicis are very rare. They did sell them over here, but not for very long. Product MGTS said, I said identified we're going at the same time as Ian Seabrook's live stream. I assure you that's not kind of something that has been planned. It's just the way that things are. If you want to go and watch Ian Seabrook, go and watch Ian Seabrook. I don't really care. Paulie Galtieri says the Polo Derby. Yeah, the Polo Derby, it was only called the Derby for the first generation. I think it was 75 to 1981. When the Mark II Polo came in, that was called the Polo Classic. That went right the way through. I think it's in 1994. There was a saloon version of the Polo available as well. I think it was still called the Polo Classic. So you had the Mark III Polo. You had the saloon version, which I haven't seen for years, and the estate version as well as everything else. But they're very rare. The Mark III Polos in sort of 3-5 door hatchback, there's still quite a few of those around, to be honest. They're not necessarily that uncommon, but the saloon and estate ones, I can't remember the last time I saw a Mark III Polo saloon or a Mark II facelift Polo Classic. I can't remember the last time I saw one of those either. Don't find some very rare saloon and estate versions of common hatchback cars, aren't we? We're really, it's quite a rich topic. I'm surprised about that, actually. Simone put on Classics says, will you be attending the Pride of Longbridge next week? Simone, I think you might have answered your own question with that. Yeah, I'm afraid if you bring your car that I think you're going to bring, we won't be able to talk about it on the channel. I do apologise in advance. Julian Knight says, good evening, sir. Good evening to everyone. Good evening to you as well, sir. Yeah. Here we go. JJ in Rotterdam says, good evening. We had a nice day today. My parents and I both bought new cars. They bought a 2021 Lincoln Co. Have Lincoln Co. actually launched in this country yet? Because I'm not actually aware that they have. I don't think they have yet, actually. They have launched in some other places, obviously, like the Netherlands. And he has bought a 2016 BMW 218 Active Tourer. I was going to film one of those, actually, last month. When I went over to Simon Langley Prestige in Chelmsford, he had one of those, and I was quite interested in doing one. I worked out that it was actually eligible second-hand reviews. But I didn't do it because the car actually was reserved before I got there. And it happens a lot with that. People reserve the cars that are on the website, and then they don't follow through with their intention to actually get it. So I missed out on filming the Active Tourer, but I'd like to do one of those, actually. I think they're quite interesting. Project MGTF says I should review your Rover be silent 5-minute video. The thing is, we've already done the April Fool's Day video, so we can't really do that more than like once a year. So I'm afraid if it happened, it's going to have to wait. Simone says never been to Pride of Longbridge. Okay, that's yeah. Well, how do I say this? Your car will fit in very well there because there are about 1,000 million forbidden fuel 75s and ZTs. So I spend virtually my entire life just dodging around the ones that I can't talk about because for some reason there's a million of them there. So yeah, I'm afraid we're going to have to skip it like we would all the others because you know the rules. Project MGTS is a diesel or well, no, we can't talk about it, can we? No, afraid not. Can't talk about that then. So we'll have to move on. Right. So Jane Rotterdam, my new BMW 218i Active Tourer, beige leather interior, heated seats. Excellent. That's a petrol too. It cost €20,000. Got 8,000 for the 2012 Prius. Wasn't that Prius really like high mileage for Jane in Rotterdam? Seem to remember it was. BMW's got 40,000 kilometers. That's nothing. It's about 30,000 miles. Simon Not Its Cars says, hello, was anyone at Brooklands today? Now, last year I did go to the Brooklands, I think they call it the Easter Gathering or something. But I found that was hard work, that actually. I remember I filmed 6 parts or something at that. Weather was like today, it was very nice. Then Simon was there last time as well, weren't you, Simon? You were there last time. Yeah, we've had to sort of move things around, so I wasn't able to go this time. Let's think about other kind of rare saloon variants of common hatchback cars. The Astra Mark IV is kind of interesting. The Astra G, that was available as a saloon, but it's quite a it's quite a sort of a common car, but I don't even know if they made the Astra G saloon, after the facelift. Someone might have to tell me about that because I don't know. Paulie Garteri says, my friend discovered there's more Ferrari F40s registered than his 2012 Superb L and K. I'm afraid we can't talk about that one on the channel, sir. JD Rotterdam says, yes, 215,000 kilometres on the Prius. It's pretty well only worth €8,000, but it's in good shape. Of course it was, they tend to be, don't they? That's not my name says after the Astra review we can't talk about is okay. Now, no, check the upload date on that, sir. I'm afraid not. I'm afraid not. Simone on Classic says, I'd like to change the interior of my 75 to cream leather. Yeah, it depends if you can find an entire interior for a 75. Just the way that it is. Although 75s are still being scrapped in quite big numbers at the moment, unfortunately. And she also says the Orion is quite rare. Yeah, the Orions are rarer than the Escorts far rarer. I think in some markets they could have outsold them. Um, but yeah, not over here for sure. After, I think it was September 1993, the Orion was just changed to being the just normal Escort, which was around the time of the Mark III Orion, they call those. And it became the Escort. Now, some of the Orions, and not all of them, but some of them, I think the gear particularly, had a rear wiper, even though it was a saloon. And I would like to try an Orion with a rear wiper. That would be rather agreeable, if it was possible. Mr. Coleman once showed me one that he knew of near Coventry somewhere. I very much enjoyed seeing that one. Simon says, saw a Mark II Focus Saloon at work. I didn't even know they did a Mark II Saloon. Yes, we were talking about this earlier. They did do a Mark II Focus, the Mark II Focus Saloon. There's actually one that lives very near to us in East. It's a gear. I'm just trying to work out if anybody's ever seen a Mark II facelift Focus Saloon, because those are really rare. Paulie Garcia says, how do you rate Mr. Richardson's 75? I've not seen that yet. I know of it. I knew about it actually before most other people did, because when I went to drive the Fiat Idea, he said that what was probably going to happen. It wasn't confirmed at the time, but it did happen in the end. The biggest problem, as I understand, is trying to get the oil filter on and off your 75 turbo, which I gather is very difficult. I'm the video of that service is in the queue of videos at the moment, so it's quite nice. I keep saying this to people. People just assume that I want a 75. I don't really. The 45 V6, I think personally I prefer them. 75 is a very nice car. They're great, but I just prefer the way a 45 drives. The 45 V6 is a lot rarer. I just prefer them, and I prefer the size of them. The 75 is quite a big car. 75 is nice and comfortable. It's a beautifully made car, but they do have the sort of problems of their own. That's 45s do as well. That's just my personal preference. I don't think possibly I would. At the moment, I might change my mind later. I don't think I'd be looking for one of those at the moment. Mr. Richardson seems quite happy with his values. He's very happy with 75. And the 1.8 turbo, which was marketed, I think, from 2002 to 2005. I think they're actually limited zone compliant as far as I know. And they replaced the 2-litre V6 75, which I have driven one, which is belonged to Mike Humble, which is very nice actually, his 2-litre V6 Connoisseur SE manual. That was very nice actually. Matt W talks about the Nissan Almera Saloon. Yes, they made Nissan Almera Saloon in both, let's get this right, the N15 and N16 Almeras both had saloon versions. They are quite rare. Another rare car from the time of the N16 Almera would be the Toyota Corolla Saloon, which they did do. They did Corolla Saloons all the way up to when the Yaris came in I think 2006. The Yaris, as far as I know, did not have a saloon version, but all the Corollas did up until that point. Jay Rotterdam says the Lincoln Co. is an incredible car. You can drive it in pure petrol mode, in regular hybrid, and full electric mode. Okay, so it's plug-in hybrid. And the hybrid and EV are separate batteries. That must be a very complicated car, that Lincoln Co. That's not my name, makes a very, very good point. The 306 sedan, yes. There was a really nice 306 sedan at, which event was it? A Pop and Fly-In, which I think was 2021. It was a beautiful green pre-facelift one at Pop and Fly-In in 2021, if you want to look at the videos. That was really good. Simone makes a good point in the Vauxhall Belmont. The Mark 1 Astra was actually marketed as a saloon and a hatchback. The hatchbacks are more common, but the saloon had the same profile as the hatchback. And the difference between the saloon and the hatchback was it looked the same, but the hinges of the boot were below the rear window. Yeah, that they were just like it was a bit like a 2CV, like the actual boot opening was just below the rear window. They weren't very common. I think there's somebody on YouTube, is it Mortals and Motors, who's got one of those. Like the poverty spec Mark 1 Astras actually also had the round headlamps rather than the square ones. They weren't flush. The Belmont was only marketed, I think, as a Belmont separately, rather than just an Astra saloon in this country. I don't think it was marketed as Belmont anywhere else. When I was younger, so I used to sometimes travel in a Belmont. They're very, very, very rare. I think what happened was that in the early 2000s, Mark II Astras and Belmonts were incredibly easy to steal. And so most of them just got stolen and written off. That's what happened to most of it because the security was so bad on them. But if I see a Belmont, I do get quite excited about those. Matt W says, I've seen a Daihatsu Charade Saloon. Yes, of the same type that I drove. I drove a 93 Charade on no budget reviews in November 2021, which was interesting. The brakes needed sort of adjusting because they were a bit scary. Yeah, I have seen pictures of those Charade saloons, but they're, again, very, very rare. I think they made them for two generations. The G102 that I drove, remember, the generation after that also had a Charade saloon. Flying Vitelot says the 306 sedan, even in France, saw more Renault 19 Chamades. Oh, I quite like a Renault 19 Chamades, particularly the sort of RXE ones. Those are really nice. I quite like that. Paulie Garcia says the Nissan Sunny Saloon. I reviewed a Nissan Sunny N13 Saloon on no budget reviews in autumn 2020. One of my friends owns that. He's still got it, I think. He's had other cars since then, but he's kept an N13 Sunny Saloon. Yeah, I've driven it quite a few times actually. I drove it all the way to Retro Ride Weekender in 2021. It was pretty good. And then Jenny points out something very very good here. The Yaris Saloon is a Toyota Echo, yeah, or Echo, Platt. There's a load of different names for it. Essentially the same thing, but the Mark 1 Yaris platform is used for all sorts of different cars. The Echo or Platt, it sort of looks a bit weird. I think the Yaris 3 and 5 door hatchback is a bit more sort of resolved, really. Matt W says he likes the Astra Belmont in 1.8 injection CD spec. Yes, sir, that was a post facelift one. Most agreeable. Mark from Bad Book says, good evening. Good evening to you, sir. That's what my name says, the Skoda Fabia Saloon. Yeah, the Skoda Fabia Saloon. A very awkward looking little car. They don't look sort of great. They're based on the same platform as the Seat Cordoba. I think the Cordoba looks a little bit nicer than Fabia Saloon. The Fabia Saloon wasn't really ever available in anything kind of like a nice trim. For some reason, they didn't do what other people did, and they didn't make it a more luxurious version of a normal hatchback Fabia. They sort of make it more like a poverty one. So all the ones I've seen have got like, unpainted door handles and windy windows and things like that. But yeah, they did market that for a while. It wasn't on the Mark II Fabia, just the Mark 1. But yeah, quite a rare truck. I don't really know why you want that. I think it's because the Fabia was a little bit smaller than the Felicia that it replaced, although the interior space is quite similar. And so if you wanted a slightly larger car, but you didn't want to go for the Octavia, which was a bit more expensive, you could go for the Fabia Saloon. I don't really know. Maybe somebody in the comment section will sort of tell me. Putting out traces, the Skoda Rapids are quite rare. Most of the taxis. The Rapid was a very strange car. It's not a saloon. The Rapid, it's not a saloon. Neither is the Seat Toledo Mark IV. They're not saloons. They're hatches. But the Rapid was also available in the Spaceback version, which my uncle has. It was actually a review of the Rapid Spaceback that I did in 2021 on Sensible Secondhand Reviews. If you want to look at that. And yeah, a lot of them were used as taxis because the boot on the standard Rapid or the standard Mark IV Toledo is enormous. I don't think I've ever owned a car with such a big boot. You can have a Toledo or a Rapid, and you can fit more stuff in there than the average estate car. They're enormous boots and very spacious. The only thing is they're not very wide because they're based on the previous generation Polo platforms. So they're not particularly wide, but they are. There's loads of leg room, masses of room in the boot. The one I had, Toledo, was very well equipped. But yeah, a lot of them are used as taxis for the same reasons why I kind of liked the one that I had. Simone says, I could be wrong, but Max's parents had a Belmont estate. The Belmont was never offered as an estate. It would just be a normal Mark II Astra Estate, and the Mark II Astra Estate, like the Mark 3 and 4 Escort Estate, you could get the Astra Estate with either 3 doors or 5 doors. I don't know why you'd want the 3-door estate version, particularly of either of those, but they existed. That's something else. The Honda Concerto Saloon. Yes, there was a Honda Concerto Saloon, and they're pretty rare actually. Those. Obviously, we're talking about rare versions. So if I'd say Rover 400 HHR Saloon, the saloon versions of those are actually quite common. Like the 45 saloons are pretty common. I don't know if there's more hatches or more saloons of the 45s, to be honest. And I own a saloon 45. I don't know actually. It's difficult to say. A lot of people did like the saloons, and obviously Rover appealed to a lot of older people. So you do see a lot of the saloons. But I'm trying to think of what else would be like a rare saloon variant of something. Yes, the last one was the previous generation Honda Civic Saloon. Those are rare. You don't see an awful lot of those at all. I don't really know what Honda marketed those, to be honest. Probably just going for the same market as the 45 saloons did at the time. And the fact is that the Accord is not marketed in this country anymore. It stopped in 2015. So I think that generation of Civic was launched around 2017. I'm not so keen on it. The current Civic that's just come out, which came out, I think sort of late summer, autumn 2022. I think it's a lovely car. I'd very, very much like to drive one of those current generation Civics. But they look really nice. Jade Rotel says, Skoda is difficult to understand. The Superb was alternative to the Passat, and Octavia, the alternative to the Golf, is the Skoda Scala. What is the function of the Octavia? With Skoda, the current Octavia has been pushed a bit more up market than the previous ones were. The Scala is like a direct competitor to the Golf, but it is on the same platform as the Fabia. So it's really a bit like an extended sort of wheelbase Fabia. I like the Scala. It's a nice size of car, that. So they kind of decided that they wanted to align the Octavia with things like the Mondeo and the Insignia, although Mondeo and Insignia are gone. The Octavia is really now kind of on its own. There's really not many of them like that left. The Mazda 6 has gone. So I don't really know of many alternatives to the Octavia at all. I don't really know. I don't think there are sort of any. I'm not sure how much longer that will last, but it's quite a big selling car in lots of markets across the continent. So there we go. I don't know. Maybe tell me in the chat what you think the function of them are. The Superb is an alternative to a Passat, but it really, I'd say, competes against things like the Mercedes E-Class, things like that. Paulie says the Mark II Skoda something. Do you mean the Superb, sir? Is that what you mean? Is superior to the same generation Passat. Matt W says Toyota launched a Corolla Saloon Hybrid 3 years ago. Yes, you're absolutely correct. They did launch a Corolla Saloon to go alongside the Sports Tourer. The Sports Tourer is very common. It's mostly used, I think, as an Uber taxi. Very often those. The Saloon Hybrid was really strange. It wasn't actually available with anything other than the most basic engine, whereas the Sports Tourer was available with both engines. You hardly see those Corolla Saloons. I have seen them around. They're most common as taxis, really. The Camry, they tried to reintroduce the Camry to this country, and it didn't even catch on particularly. It was very, very strange, and that's gone. That's not my name. We're talking about a Civic Saloon for the last generation. That's right. Yeah, you could get a 1 litre or a forbidden fuel Civic Saloon from the previous generation. That's absolutely right. The Saloon was dropped, I think, around the time they facelifted it. Just the hatch was made. It was very quietly dropped. Simone says, I drove a Skoda Superb Saloon stroke hatchback, because they're all of them from the Mark II onwards of the Superbs are a hatchback or a saloon, which I think is just wonderful. The only problem is you can't get a rear wiper because of the design. You don't get one, which is kind of annoying, but there we are. Mr. Hard from Rubber Joe says, hello. Hello to you, sir. I hope you're doing well. Mr. Harwood and I have been discussing um, um, the projects that he's got coming up, which I'm sure are very interesting. Um, Everything Carl says, do I like Allegros? Well, I've got a review of Allegro actually. I did in 2021. It belongs to Alex from the Alex's Assets channel. It's a 74 with a quartic steering wheel in blaze red. So if you want to know what I think about Austin Allegros, you can look that one up. It's on Sensible Secondhand Classics. Yeah, Paulie Galtieri says the superb of the Hatchell Saloon. That's right. Yeah, we kind of like those. That's not my name. Said we had a Nova 3-door saloon, 1 litre. Yeah. We know about those, sir, because we did a Nova Saloon on Sensible Secondhand Classics last year. In fact, it was a 5-door Nova Trip from the early 90s, and it was also the 1 litre. It's not very fast. The brakes are also really terrible on those for some reason. I don't really know why. They just have really bad brakes. They've got a servo on them, but they're a bit rubbish, actually, the brakes on most Novas. JDN Rotterdam says the same with Opel and Vauxhall years ago. Astra compete with Golf, Astra compete with Passat. Who did the Omega compete with? Well, it was supposed to compete initially with the Ford Scorpio. That came out about the same time as the Mark IV Scorpio, but the Scorpio was dropped because they overestimated the number of those they'd sell, and they decided to give it some controversial styling, which is a bit of a shame. They drive really well, those Mark IV Scorpios. I have driven one. They're very nice, a nice interior, but it was just about the looks, wasn't it? The 5 Series E39 or the W210 Mercedes E-Class or the Audi A6 all looked a bit better than that Scorpio, didn't they, dears? Right, let's just see what else can we think of that's in an obscure estate or saloon version of a common hatchback car. What else is there? Ones that sell in really tiny numbers over here. I can't think. You've mentioned the Mark III Renault Clio estate, haven't we? There was also an estate version of the previous generation Seat Ibiza. I've driven one of those. Yeah, it was one of the last ones, the Moscow Fabia estate. That was the last one of all in terms of the estate versions of little hatchbacks. That was discontinued when the Fabia let's get this right, the Mark IV Fabia came out sort of late 2021. I have driven a Mark IV Fabia, but it was just a normal hatch one. It's not bad. Mr. Harden Joe says, I'm looking forward to the Pride of Longbridge. I'll be getting a new boot floor there. You will indeed, sir, and we look forward to it very much. That's what my name says. Remember the Mazda 121 from the 90s? The one you mean is the one that looks like an Austin 35. I forget the model code for those, but I certainly do remember those, and you could get them with an automatic transmission and power steering. It's a time when Mazda was actually split across several divisions, and we got products from sort of AutoZam and F&E and UNOS and all this sort of stuff. And Mazda thought, because of the way in which in Japan you could sell all these little niche cars, that they would just be like, I don't know, Nissan or Lexus and have Toyota and have various divisions. But unfortunately, the economy sort of collapsed a bit in the 90s, and it was a complete waste of their time, and they weren't really sort of big enough to make that work. And I think the little 121 saloon was actually sold in AutoZam. Was it the AutoZam Review in Japan? I'm not wrong about that, actually. Polygator says the Kia Mentor. Yeah, there was the Kia Schumer and the Kia Mentor. The Kia Mentor was also based on a Mazda, that one, the 323. And I remember the Schumer, which was the hatchback version of the Kia, and there was a Mentor 2 and a Schumer 2. They were sold until about 2003, 2004 when the Cerato came out, and then the Ceed replaced those, and the Ceed never available as a saloon, but the Kia Forte, which is sold in places like America, is very similar to a Kia Ceed. Simone says, was there a booted version of the Daewoo Nexia? Yes, there absolutely was a version of the Daewoo Nexia with a boot. If you are a member of the Seoul Classics Facebook group, Seoul's in Korea, then sometimes I think some people on there do own them. The only Nexias I've driven a manual and an auto. They're only available with two engines, and they were both variants of the same 1.5 Family 1 engine, I think it was. Um, Both of those were the more powerful version of it, and one was a manual, one was an auto. Both the XLII spec, which is the highest spec of the Nexia. I think I'm the only person in this country on YouTube in modern times who've driven two Daewoo Nexias, and I was very happy with both of them. Well, the steering's really kind of woolly and vague in those. Um, Bad Book says the Mazda Demio estate. I don't think the Mazda Demio estate was actually sold over here, to be honest. I don't think I've ever seen one. The Demio wasn't really in a state. Well, what actually was the Mazda Demio? It was sort of predecessor to the Mazda 2. It looked kind of like a very small sort of MPV, or some of them had the sort of little fake bull bar on them. I don't actually know what the Mazda Demio was. Maybe some of you could actually tell me what sort of car that actually was. But it was the thing that replaced the 121. In this country, the 121 for a time was a rebadged version of the Ford Fiesta, the Mark IV, and I think briefly the Mark V. But then the Demio came out. Mitsubishi Space Star, that was based on the same platform as the Charisma and the Volvo S40 and V40, and the Proton Impian. Actually, the Impian was based on that platform too. And they started with a 1.3 and went to the 1.8. I've actually sourced a Mitsubishi Space Star for a client back in the day. This is in the days of before the ultra emission zone, and it was a 1.5 automatic. This was about, I don't know, 2017, 18 or something. She quite enjoyed it. It was okay to drive. It wasn't anything special, but it was all right. JD Rotterdam says the only thing I've accepted fuel consumption of a new BMW. Prius was 20 to 25 litres. Sorry, 1 litre gas petrol per 20 or 25 kilometres. A BMW used a litre for 15 to 16 kilometres. I can't quite work that out, but the Prius might have done 60 miles per gallon plus, and I think the BMW is probably like 40, 45 miles per gallon, something like that. Simone from Red Classic saying hello to Mr. Harwood. Mark from Bad Book says there was an 2000s Mazda Demio. Yeah, it's definitely the Demio you're thinking of. I just don't know how to describe the Demio. Was it a super mini? Was it a little SUV? Was it a little MPV? Was it an estate? I don't really know. I think it's kind of all of those really. Pulling out to the Mitsubishi Colt Saloon Estate. Yes, there was a Colt Saloon. I can't remember when that was. It's probably like the late 80s, early 90s. There was an estate version of the Colt as well, but I don't even remember when that was. Maybe somebody can sort of correct me about that. That's what my name says. Can you remember the Suzuki X90? Yeah, I certainly can. I went to a show once and there were 3 of those in the show. They're all purple, I think. Very bizarre, strange car. It was like a first generation Vitara, but with a 2-door saloon body and a weird front end. It's one of the strangest cars. I don't even know who that was supposed to be designed for, really. Everything Cars said, how many cars have you owned? What's your favourite? There's actually a video on the channel called How Many Cars Have I Owned 2020 version, and that goes through all of them. Apart from 3, which is the Volvo C70, T5, the Sanion we have now, and the Rover 45 V6. What's my favourite? I've absolutely no idea. I don't know, actually. I find it hard to quantify things like that because I've had a lot of different cars. But yeah, it's on the channel. It's called How Many Cars Have I Owned 2020 edition, if you want to see that. Jane Rotterdam says, the Mitsubishi Charisma was made in Holland. Yes, it was at the Nedcar factory. I remember we were proud of it, and the car was assembled here. So the Charisma sold well in the Netherlands. Yeah, I'm sure it did. It didn't sell too well over here because of the name, really, and the fact that The joke was, and it still is in this country, that it didn't really have much in the way of charisma. It's the oldest joke ever. Um, Matt W says the Colt Saloon um, sells a Lancer. Yeah, possibly. It gets very confusing with Mitsubishi because they sold loads of different names of the same car. It's like the Mirage and the Colt and the Lancer and all sorts of things, and often they were the same car, just in different brands, and it got really confusing because the UK importer was called the Colt Car Company, and for a long time they didn't use the name Mitsubishi on the cars and all sorts of things. But yeah, quite possibly, I get confused about that kind of stuff with Mitsubishi UK. Mark from Bad Book says Mitsubishi Space Star. Yes, Mitsubishi Space Star was based on the Charisma platform, and it's a bit bigger, I'd say, than a Demio. A little bit bigger. They're not that much bigger, but I'd say really that the Mitsubishi Space Star, if you even remember them, because there's not many of them around, um, that's really a little MPV, I'd say, rather than as a estate. I don't think they marketed a Charisma estate though. No, I don't think they did. I think it was either a saloon or a hatch. Simone says I found the Charisma rather bland. I think that was the problem. The really early ones, the sounding was quite bland, but there were tons of cars that looked just like that in the 90s. A lot of them did look kind of the same back in the day. So I like with the SUVs today, a lot of those do look the same as well, but that was one of the things where you sort of heard about it. Oh, right. Jane Rotter says, I remember Kia and Mitsubishi worked together, and the Mitsubishi Space Wagon was the same car as the Kia Joyce. Yes, it was. That's absolutely right. I don't think Mitsubishi had too many things in common with that, apart from the what was it called? Yeah, because Hyundai and Kia and Mitsubishi had several cars that were the same. Yeah, the main one I know is the Hyundai Galloper, which was a Mitsubishi Shogun, which was rebadged. There were two generations of that actually. If anybody remembers the Hyundai Galloper, what was this later name of that? I can't remember. Someone else might be able to tell me. There's a different name for it, I think. Mr. Harwood says, wasn't the Charisma a Volvo underneath? Yes, that's absolutely correct. The Charisma was a Volvo S40 or V40 underneath. They actually shared the same engine. It was a 1.8 GDI engine, which is, I think, one of the only Volvo petrol engines that won't run on E10. Is the 1.8 GDI engine fitted to some S40 and V40, the same as the Charisma GDI engine. Chaz Brown says the Space Star in Europe the same as the Mirage over here. Yes, that's right. The Mirage, which is no longer imported now, was also sold as a Space Star in some places. Mirage is a strange car as well. That was sold as a saloon in some markets, including America, where I can't remember what they called it over there. I think it was a Mirage. Can't remember. The Hyundai Accent, as Paul Gattieri says, was sold as a saloon. Yeah, that's right. I think the Mark 1 and Mark 2s were sold as a saloon. That's what my name is, the Honda Ballard and the Triumph Acclaim. Yeah, they were both variants of that generation of Honda Civic, but the saloon version. Mr. Coleman says, hello, Mr. Coleman. I've been discussing carburetors earlier on this evening because Mr. Coleman knows how to rebuild carburetors and set them up. Very few people now do, I think. And he says hello to poor Paulie. Has anyone else got anything else they want to say apart from what we've already said? There's one thing that I will say about the Hyundai Accent. Before the i30 came out, there was this really strange time between 2005 and 2007 where they literally had to import the next generation Accent because the i30 wasn't ready, and they imported the little Accent as 3 doors. It was I think called the Atlantic. I think it was only imported is a 1.4 for about 2 years. Those are really rare now. I did see one for sale once. I thought of buying it because I just find them very interesting. Also, the Elantra was also on sale, but they uh, sort of replaced both the Elantra and the Accent with the i30, and of course the i30 had an estate version as well. Um, Mr. Coleman just confirmed that he did rebuild the carburetor on the Granada earlier. Yes, he did, and have a nice little blast up the bypass. Mr. Harwood says he can't wait. The festival is exceptional, and looking forward to the Furious Driving Social event. As most of you probably know, it's been advertised in virtually every video for like a month. There is a Furious Driving Social event, which is happening at the Motorist near Leeds on the 30th of April. And yes, I've been planning for months to go to that. Somebody who's very kind has offered me an enormous number of cars to film whilst I'm actually in the area, so I'm looking forward to that. Jade Rotterdam says, I owned a Kia Cerato Saloon 2 litre in 2006. I felt like a lone wolf because there weren't any other Cerato saloons. If I saw one, it was a hatch. The Cerato Saloon was actually sold over here, and I did consider buying one a while ago. They're not very expensive when they come up, and the saloons were sold over here, but they weren't sold with a 2 litre engine. I think it was only a 1.6 that we got with the Cerato Saloon. I think Cerato's only sold with like 1.4, 1.6 over here, and then the engines we can't talk about as well. Simone says the Vauxhall Viva hatch and saloon from the 70s. Yeah, the HC Viva was mainly sold at the saloon, but there were also sort of coupe versions called the Firenze, and there was an estate version as well. Whether or not you think of that as a hatchback or an estate, it looks like a hatchback, but it's an estate. And then there was the amazing sports hatch thing, which was the front end of a Firenze Droopster and the rear end of a Vauxhall Viva estate. They're only sold in one colour. They are amazing cars, but there's very few of those around. Mr. Coleman is taking the Veteran Festival Exceptional. He certainly is. Yeah, just confirming Mark from Bad Books that it's the first time the carburetor has been rebuilt in about 15 years. Mighty Captain says, good evening, did we miss much? We're talking about rare estate and saloon versions of common hatchback cars. We've talked about a lot of them tonight. Simone says, Leeds is too far away. Yeah, it's quite a long way from Plymouth, isn't it, Leeds? Mr. Coleman says, couldn't you get a Proton Gen 2 saloon? Yes, you could. I've actually driven one of those. It was a Proton Gen 2 Persona was the name of that. There was also a saloon version of the original Persona or later the Wera. You could get them, but the rarest version of the original Persona or Wera was the Proton Coupe that was called the Putra, I think, in Malaysia. That was similar to the Mitsubishi Mirage. I think the only engine available for the Proton Coupe in this country was the 1.8. It was the same as in a Proton Satria GTI. Which is pretty good. I really want to drive a Proton Coupe, but they're really, really rare. That's not my name, so I had a Suzuki Baleno 4-door, yes. Baleno is not sold over here anymore, but the first generation Baleno we got, which is called the Cultus, I think in other places, or some other name, I can't forget now. That had a 3-door hatch. I think you get a 5-door hatch. You get an estate as well of that. But the 4-door saloon. Maybe there wasn't a 5-door hatch of that. I can't remember now. It's been a while since I've seen a first generation Baleno. Mr. Harwood says he's taking the 25 Festival Exceptional. Yeah, that should be fine. Like anything that's got a rover badge on it, you just get into classic parking anyway. I might be taking a 45 V6 to that. I don't know actually yet. I haven't decided yet. Depends if I buy another car that's actually more kind of typical Festival Exceptional that I take. But at the moment it's going to be the Rover because it's got cruise control, which is nice. JDN Rotterdam says the saloon I enjoyed most of the channel was the 1995 Hyundai Elantra. Yeah, we've actually had three first generation Hyundai Elantras on the channel. It was the only channel where we had three of them. One was a 1.5 manual, one was a 1.6 auto, and then there was a walk around of a facelifted 1.6 auto. And he says, still filming the Hyundai XL Saloon. The XL Saloon in the Netherlands was called the Hyundai X2 by that stage. When the XL that was known as the Pony in this country came out in '85, it was called the Pony. And then in 1990 there was a facelift where they called it the X2 Pony. And then the very late ones, 92 to 95, were just called the Hyundai X2. And they did sell those over here, but they're not very common. Any Hyundai X2, whether it's a Pony or not, is very uncommon. Mr. Coleman says, my brother will take his 190E. It's a shame, Mr. Coleman, we can't talk about your brother's 190E because I'm afraid it's got the wrong type of engine in it. Rob Brady says, I once found myself in the back of a Turkish police car, which is a four-door booted version of the Renault Clio. Yeah, that'll be the Renault Talia or the Clio symbol, I think. That's what they're called. That car was the basis for the first generation Dacia Logan as well. That's where it all started, was on that particular sort of platform. Right, 51 minutes we've been going so far. The Honda Accord Aerodeck 3-door with pop-up headlamps of the 80s says that's not my name. Yes, you're absolutely right. I knew somebody's got one of those, and it's the one that was featured on Ian Seabrook's channel a while ago. It's not working at the moment, I don't think, but I do know of that one. Mark from Bad Book says the Ford Mondeo Mark IV Saloon. Yes, I've not seen too many of those. There's also a Mark V Saloon, which is again available as a hybrid. Misha Falcon, who says, good evening to you, sir. Jane Ronda says, you still see the 1998 Mazda 626 here and there on the streets. Maybe on down the channel. Well, I've actually owned a 1998 Mazda 626. I've actually owned one of those. I owned it before I ran the channel, but that's a story for another time. Mr. Coleman says the Cavalier Mark II estate, all those are rare. They had to use the rear panels of a Holden Chimera imported from Australia, and I think affixed to the Opel Asconas over on the continent, and the Mark II Cavalier in Luton. But yeah, they're very rare. I think they were worse for rust than the normal Mark II Cavaliers, which weren't the best, but very little from the 1980s was resistant to rust particularly. The only one I know that was particularly sort of resistant to rust from that era was probably the Peugeot 205. That wasn't too bad. Renault 9 or 19 says Simone from Picton Classics. Yeah, we haven't discussed the Renault 9 yet. I've not seen too many of those. They came out before the 11 did. Came out in 82, and they were sold in some places up until sort of mid to late 90s. I think they visited them several times. I haven't seen a Renault 9 for a very long time. 19 and 19 Chamar, which was the saloon version. I think we discussed this earlier. I'd really liked it to have a go in a 19 Chamar, preferably like an RXE, which is the sort of luxurious version of those. Mr. Coleman says the Mark II Cavalier estate was terrible. It's only available as a 1.6 GL and one we cannot discuss. Yes, indeed. Yeah, not a common car. Jane Rudlove says, have you ever seen a Simca 1100 in real life? I actually have. Yes, there was one at the Practical Restoration Show. It was called a 1204, I think, which is the more upper trim model. But yes, pretty much, yeah, I have seen one. It's on the Simca Talbot stand, and that was a lovely stand, that Simca Talbot stand, actually. It was really good. Matt W says, I believe that Indian Hyundai buyers get a saloon or sedan version of the Hyundai i10, the Grand i10. I don't know, sir, possibly. Paulie Galtieri says, wasn't there a Ford Fiesta saloon for South American markets? Not just South America. The Ford Fiesta saloon was actually sold in America. I think there's a channel called Autovlog. Swedish chap who lives in America who started off as a Ford salesman, but now is, I don't know, like influencer type chap. And he started off at Deschamps Township Ford, wherever he is in America somewhere, and they were selling Fiesta saloon for the Mark 7 Fiesta available as a saloon over there. They'd also sold the hatchback STs. But it says the Ford Festiva. I don't think we ever got a Kia Pride saloon over here, but certainly in places like Iran there was a Kia Pride based saloon. I think they might still be making cars based on the Pride now, over in Iran. I could be wrong, but certainly in 2020 when I filmed the first generation Pride that belonged to Mr. Curry, then certainly, yeah. Mr. Coleman says, do you still have the Simca 1301 badges that I gave you from the banger racer that we had? I do. Yeah, I've still got a set of Simca 1301 badges. I don't know what to do with them, actually. I don't know where to put them. I should put them in my display case, actually. Yeah, Mr. Coleman, I think, and his friends are the only people who I know have ever raced Simca 1301. It was completely dead, though. There wasn't really much left of it when they tried to drive it. Matt W says there was a Kia Pride estate. Yes, there was, as well as the saloon. I think that was again sold in something like Iran. Martin Clapton says you drive many cars to the channel. Yeah, I've driven in the last year somewhere in the region of 200 cars on the channel. It's some stupid amount. Own dream classic car. I don't know. It depends what you also define as a classic car. I mean, you're asking me to pick one, and I don't think I can, really. It's not really possible. General says the Skoda 100 saloon with a rear engine. Yeah, the Skoda like 130 and 135s. Yeah, I think we got those as far as I remember. Mr. Coleman says the only Simca 1301 to be raced. Yeah, I imagine it must have been. I think they raced it on the original. Oh gosh, it wasn't the Simca Rush engine. I forget what the engine in the Simca 301 was. I don't think it was the Rush engine. It wasn't the Poissy engine. I don't remember what it was actually. I forget now. I'm not really an expert on the Simcas to be able to say. Right, I think that's enough actually. We've always been going an hour, so thank you ever so much indeed once again for watching this slightly less than professional live stream number 42. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks, like in the comment below. Thank you to everybody who's liked this video so far, and we shall see you again soon for more slightly rambling entertainment.